Hello, good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Let's begin with the upcoming Tanjung Piai by-election. Saturday, 2nd November is nomination day in Tanjung Piai, and Pakatan Harapan's candidate has been announced, Karmaini Sardini, and Gerakan has also announced that it is fielding its Deputy Secretary General, Wendy Subramaniam. And now the latest on this is that Barisan Nasional will be fielding two-time Tanjung Piai MP Wee Jek Seng. What do you make of this race, Sharaad?
Well, I'd like to start with the names. They're actually quite fascinating because I'm sure everybody's trying to figure out how to pronounce Mr. Sardini's name. I mean,
Mr. Karmaini,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, that is partly due to the fact that it's got an unusual Malay name, and, you know, I think in accepting our diversity, this is something that we'll need to learn. Also, Wendy Subramaniam, there she is, a Gerakan candidate. She's also biracial. And she's half Indian, half Chinese. She carries an Indian name. She does speak Mandarin, apparently. And the question is whether all that, especially the identity of the contestants, ethnic identity of the contestants are going to matter as much as all the other factors, I think, that are involved.
Do you think it will matter, the ethnic identity of the candidate, or do you think that the local status is more important? Because all three candidates are local. In fact, I believe Bersatu President Muhyiddin Yassin was quick to point out that Karmaini's local boy status was one of the reasons why he was picked to stand. And now we have the Barisan Nasional candidate Wee Jek Seng, who was a two-time MP. He won in 2008 and 2013.
Yeah. So there's another very interesting aspect to the race, Melisa, which was the tensions around the announcement of the Barisan Nasional candidate. Remember, Ridwan T, who's a kind of a very vocal advocate of Malay nationalism, though he's ethnic Chinese, did mention the fact that he thought MCA was putting pressure on UMNO and PAS to field a Chinese candidate. Of course, UMNO and PAS, in some sense, since their much lauded cooperation, did have fielded, in fact, an MCA candidate. It's quite interesting because
it's interesting.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
they have gone back to the Barisan Nasional template of, customary kind of seats, so seats that are taken up by some parties and sort of stayed true to that. And that's very fascinating.
I think this will be definitely a much-watched affair, this by-election, because it will be BN's first electoral outing since the signing of the UMNO-PAS Charter of Cooperation. Another reason I think this is interesting is Gerakan is in this race. I wonder what Gerakan is doing in this race. I wonder whether they are hoping to revive their political fortunes as an alternative to Pakatan Harapan, but also going up against Barisan Nasional, which they were once a part of.
Yeah. Again, I guess in this kind of new Malaysia where we kind of I think the idea of diversity and choice is very important because this changes the dynamic somewhat. Whether a Gerakan candidate will take votes away from Pakatan or whether it will take votes away from the Barisan Nasional UMNO candidate. I think it's very interesting because, the calculation for the people on the ground will be, will they be voting for the most winnable candidate, Melisa, or will they be voting for the candidate that expresses their interests more accurately?
Yeah, that's going to be one to watch. We will keep a very close eye on this story. But in other news, we have the think tank Ideas, or the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, today releasing a report on GLCs titled The State of Play Since GE14. Now, one interesting finding in this study is that 6 Pakatan Harapan candidates who lost in GE14 have been appointed as board members of statutory bodies under the Rural and Regional Development Ministry. And another 2 candidates who won in GE14 was also appointed to GLCs. So in total, there are 8 appointments as directors, 5 from Bersatu, 2 from Amanah, and 1 from PKR. What do we make of this?
Well, first of all, we start with the pledges that were made to kind of rid ourselves of a culture where political appointments are made, especially to GLCs, to make it, make the choices based on competence and other criteria. And of course, there's no reason to believe that just because they are politically, that they're not competent. But I think it's incumbent upon the government of the day to go the extra mile in explaining exactly why they have chosen because some people will see it as reward, have chosen to reward their supporters with these plum positions. And plum positions, I say, because they will get a stipend,
Yes.
but also very important, and this is because the question of the public good, they will be loyal to the government of the day, not necessarily to the public interest. And I think that's where the critics are looking at. They're looking at whether they will be able to exercise their judgment, their good judgment, independent of the government of the day.
Well, I think this is really interesting, particularly because, I mean, Pakatan Harapan came into Malaysia Baru was the promise of reforms, right? The promise of no longer having political appointments to government-linked entities. Now, I'm just wondering whether this is, a step in the right direction of those promised reforms. In fact, the lead author of this report, Professor Terence Gomez, who's the senior fellow at Ideas, he said the question to be asking is how is the institutional architecture that Mahathir himself created being reformed, and that's something that we have to pay close attention to.
Yeah, and I think in the Malaysia Baru scenario, something like a GLC watch or any kind of watch, actually, watch over reforms is kind of essential. Keeping politicians on their toes, as well as keeping the public constantly informed of the maneuvers of government that they might miss, because mostly in our daily lives, we don't have time to watch what's happening in government.
But also to dismantle some of these structural issues. We no longer want to be playing the same patronage games in Malaysia Baru. All right, in other news, we have police suggesting to the Home Ministry to include caning into the law against those who are involved in the illegal wildlife trade. So the Inspector General Police, Abdul Hamid Badur, said that the existing sentence is too lenient for perpetrators. What do you think? Should we add caning, corporal punishment to this?
Well, because, we might be taking a leaf out of the playbook of Aceh, the province in Indonesia, that's already instituted caning, whipping for crimes of this sort. They, of course, also whip people for adultery, for homosexuality, for a whole range of things, which, we don't have here in this country. The question is, while whipping might be a deterrent, is deterrence itself an adequate reason for introducing corporal punishment for such crimes? I'm not quite sure. We need to have a conversation about that. Is the punishment commensurate with the crime?
Well, okay, let's think about it. Right? Wildlife trafficking is thought to be the fourth most valuable illicit commerce in the world. This is after drugs, human trafficking, and weapons trafficking. Often these are all kind of interlinked. So, and the problem has always been enforcement has been quite weak, but also loopholes within the law. You give a fine to these perpetrators and they are able to pay it without even blinking an eyelash.
Yeah. Okay, so the question of, maybe enhancing the sentencing, increasing fines, but also investing in the protection of our wildlife. Right? It means giving more money and attracting people into protecting our forest reserves, border controls, all kinds of intelligence that might be used. In fact, supporting a good journalism that also can ferret out some illegal practices. I mean, all that needs to go together. I mean, just looking at punishment, 100 lashes for wildlife trafficker, I don't know if that's really the way to look at this problem, Melisa.
All right. After this, we're going to turn our attention to the move to decriminalize drug use in Malaysia. Make sure you stay tuned to consider this.